Michael, you have worked with companies and governments in the region in terms of increasing competitiveness. One of the questions we pose for this session is there a latecomer's advantage? Is this the right question to ask? And if it is there a latecomer's advantage?
The answer is this the right question to ask is both yes and no. Okay. And I'll explain that.
Spoken like a true professor.
Yeah. Well, it's even better, you teach by case method. You just ask the questions to the students. No, well, first off, it's economic development. It's never too late. It's never too late to improve. It's never too late to reform. Another thing is that economic development, economic reform is a positive-sum game. Every economy that starts down that road benefits from all the other economies that have been down that road, and in fact also benefits those economies as well in terms of creating market opportunities, investment opportunities, etc. I would say that there are distinct advantages from embarking on this path today. One is the obvious. It's the list of experiences that have been had in the region and around the world. We have within ASEAN, of course, some of the world's leading success stories. I'm hearing an echo, so do people hear me? Yeah, okay. We have some of the world's leading success stories, and quite frankly, we have some stories of what not to do and how not to do it as well that we've seen over the years. We've seen in the rise of the other ASEAN economies and also China and India an unprecedented array of markets in Myanmar's region that it can serve. And we also have seen the emergence of an unprecedented set of investors. No longer does one have to wait for investment from the US or Europe or Japan. One also has the opportunities for investment from China, India, the rest of the ASEAN countries. And of course, the progress within ASEAN itself in terms of integration, reform, that also creates opportunities. And we also have to layer in the way that the global economy works these days. What's exciting for developing countries today is that developing countries don't have to do everything for themselves. What we see in global supply chains and even within individual companies is the slicing up of activities into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, each of them placed in their optimal location and then tied together into international systems. So if we look all around ASEAN, there is no single ASEAN economy that developed itself. The development of each of the ASEAN economies has been as much an international and regional phenomenon as it has been a local phenomenon. And to the extent that ASEAN has made progress, that's an advantage as well. Well, what would I put on the other side of the ledger? Well, of course, we're facing globally economic problems, particularly in the West. And while we may talk about an Asian century, remember it's not until about 2030 that we expect that Asia will comprise about a third of world GDP. And at the end of this century, Asia still might not reach its share of global GDP as it has in global population. So the rest of the world matters, and the rest of the world is not in great shape today. And another thing, of course, is that there's a lot of competition. If Myanmar had embarked on this path 20 years ago, there would be far fewer companies, far fewer countries already operating at every rung in terms of the economic development ladder and at every price point. So the competition is tougher. And while ASEAN is making a lot of progress, when I'm asked about the ASEAN 2015 program, I ask, do you mean the part that will be instituted in 2015 or the part that will be instituted by 2020 or maybe even a little later than that? So again, plus side of the ledger, minus side of the ledger. But is this a relevant question? I would say for outsiders like many of us, and for people thinking about, investment and investment trajectories, the question of will Myanmar have a steeper or flatter development trajectory than other economies that have gone on the path before is a very real question, a very relevant question, because it will heavily influence your investment returns. However, if I put myself perhaps in His Excellency's shoes for a second, if it's a disadvantage to be a late mover, does that mean you don't move? The answer is no. And if it's an advantage to be a late mover, does that provide any additional impetus to move beyond what is already there in terms of providing the best standard of living possible to the largest number of people as possible? I would say no. So for outsiders, analysts, international investors, it's a very relevant question. Quite frankly, for insiders, the people who are going to make it happen within Myanmar, I would say it's a less relevant question, and the really relevant question there is what specifically are the lessons to learn, what are the lessons to avoid, and what are the catchphrases sometimes to avoid, and who the potential allies are in the process.